Hello, gentle marketers. Welcome to episode 19 of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current marketing paradigm. I'm Sarah Croce. I'm your host here, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who is looking for a different, better way to market your business. Or you are an entrepreneur or intrapreneur who is just simply tired of the traditional marketing model and are ready for a paradigm shift. Real quick before I begin, in about 2 weeks, a new live program round starts on January 28th. I'm talking about the Gentle Marketing Revolution program. This is the program that I keep talking about on this show, and I run it live only twice per year. I'd love for you to check out the full details at thegentlemarketingrevolution.com to see if it's a good fit for you. Another option for you to find out more about this topic and my work is to join us for a free 5-day Gentle Marketing Intensive that I'm hosting. It starts January 13th, so that's in 3 days. Besides a daily email prompt, we'll also meet for 3 live workshops via Zoom. The topics of these workshops are the following: the one-page marketing plan. So that's where we go over the 7 P's of gentle marketing, the cause of marketing anxiety and the cure. And then finally, the last one is all about the creative process, how to bring more creativity into your marketing. I would love to get to meet you during these 5 days. You can find out more and sign up at bit.ly.com/gentle marketing intensive. The links are clickable. If you're on a mobile device, just go into the description of your podcast feed and the links are clickable in there. And you can still join even if it's already past the 13th of January 2020. And I'm talking like if it's the 14th or the 15th. If you're listening to this a year later, unfortunately, it's probably too late and you'll have to just go to my website to see for another one coming up. So in today's episode, I invited Rasoul back onto the show. Katie was a guest on the previous version of this podcast under episode 63. So if you want to listen to that, sarahsanacroce.com/episode 63. Today's episode falls under the P of personal power. And if you don't know what I'm talking about because you're new here, you can download your one-page marketing plan with the gentle marketing version of the 7 P's of marketing at sarahsanacroce.com/one-page. Katie's a leadership coach, keynote speaker, and team culture expert, helping leaders grow personally and professionally through her company, Team Awesome. She has led leadership, organizational development, and HR best practices for more than a decade, including serving as a vice president of human resources for a nearly $4 billion publicly traded company. Katie's a TEDx and Disrupt speaker, alumna, and author of the best-selling book, Hidden Brilliance, a High-Achieving Introvert's Guide to Self-Discovery, Leadership, and Playing Big. She also co-hosts the Life and Leadership podcast as a platform of conversations for powerful people to level up. Katie's a mom of 2 tiny humans, a proud advocate for her awesome hometown, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and a macaroni and cheese aficionado. So we'll talk about personal power and more specifically about your own definition of success, your core values, and how all of this relates to marketing. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Katie. Hi, Katie. So glad to have you back on this show.
Thanks so much for having me back. This is such a pleasure.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you. And I forgot to look up the episode number when you were last here on the previous show called the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast, but I'll make sure to add that in the show notes if people are curious to find out a bit more about you as the introverted entrepreneur, because that was, your TED Talk was a lot about that, right? The high-achieving introvert.
It was, yeah. I mean, that was kind of a big part of my aha in my journey is my being an introvert, but also pairing that with like the big dreams that I had and how to make those things work together.
Exactly. And that's what we want to talk about. Like in your book, Hidden Brilliance, you talk about intrinsic motivation, about, being so driven to achieve big things. But sometimes, like it was the case for you, this comes with this feeling of heaviness, or this, I call it, because I have it as well, I call it this weight on my shoulders, like this weight of responsibility. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I realize after the fact that I have been living really my whole life with this weight, but because I carried it every day and pretty much every moment of every day, even from a young age, I didn't even know really that it was there until I did and could name it and start to understand it. But that feeling of heaviness, I do have a really strong sense of responsibility, whether it's to do big things or to follow through on my dreams. And all of that motivation always came from me. Like my parents never really pressured me to do anything in particular or get really good grades. I sort of did all of that on my own. And so it's really a lifetime now. I'm looking back and seeing where those things were really helpful in getting things done and being able to achieve big things. And then where are they actually getting in my way of getting the success that I'm looking for?
Yeah, it's so interesting because when I read your book and saw that sticky note that was on one of the first pages, right? I'm like, oh my God, that's what's been happening. So tell us about your sticky note.
Yeah. So a little backstory. I had started my own business. It had been about 6 months since I left my corporate role, and everything seemed to be going well, other than the fact like, oh, I'll have, my business ready and I'll be making money and it'll be all, taking off in about 3 months, right? No big deal. That seems about right. And over the course of time, I started to notice this weight and this heaviness and this stress level. And pretty quickly, it escalated to be something that was just this overwhelming sense of weight. And I grabbed a sticky note and I wrote down this sentence. Didn't know what it meant at the time, but I wrote it down and I wrote, I am being crushed by the rising expectations for greatness because I don't have anyone holding me back anymore. And I just looked at it like, well, great. What the hell does that mean? And I have to unpack that. But for me, it's all me now. No one is stunting my potential, which is great. And no one is stunting my potential. So now I have to live into it. And that feels really big and scary. And my expectations were always really unrealistic for myself. So I no longer had a ceiling for my expectations or a boss who acted as a sounding board that was telling me something was good enough. So now as an entrepreneur, I would just keep working on something and working towards I don't know what, but there was no ceiling anymore because I was not a good litmus test of expectations for myself. So that's why I was feeling so crushed. And I wrote the sticky note down and then spent a good amount of time in coaching and self-reflection to really unpack that.
Is that when you started writing the book as well?
It was. So the sticky note really began just this awakening for me and beginning to understand so many things about myself that had always been there, but I was so unaware of. And that ended up being a journey that became a TEDx talk that I gave in 2017, which was called Uncovering the High-Achieving Introvert. And as I continued to prepare for that talk and really process some of the things that were happening, I realized that I had more to say and more to learn about it than would fit in those 18 minutes on the red circle. So that is what the book became. And so Hidden Brilliance is really an expansion of that experience that I talk about in the TED Talk with this Post-it note and unpacking all of that. And through the process of writing it, some of it is part story and some of it is part doing the work. So I actually share, these are all of the coaching-based activities that I personally did to get to the other side from point A to point B, and figuring out how I define success, figuring out what's important to me, and all of those things so that I now am way more aware of who I am as a person and a leader than I ever was before.
I heard this quote once, I'm going to get it wrong, but something along the lines where as entrepreneurs, we're so privileged because we're getting paid to do our own personal development, right? To do our inner work. And it's so true, isn't it? Because like you said, there's no more boss and there's kind of no more trance. I feel like when we're in this corporate situation, it's kind of like this busyness. Oh, we're always busy. We know what we have to do. We're just doing our thing. And we never actually reflect about these really important questions like, who am I? What's my purpose? What do I want to do with my life? And yeah, the word success, that's so often used in a business context. So I find it so fascinating how this happened only after you left your corporate job. Would you think that it could have happened during your career in corporate?
I think so. I loved that you used the word trance. I think that's a really good word that describes my experience. It's like we get up, we go to work, we just do a bunch of meetings that don't really accomplish anything, and we go home and then we repeat it. And I believe I started to kind of have this new experience and awakening after I returned to work after having my son, my first child, where I started to be really obsessed with the value of time.
Right.
And I'd only see my son for an hour at night before he had to go to bed. And basically, anytime someone wasted an hour of my life at work, I'd be like, that's an hour. I don't have an hour for that.
Yeah.
And so I think my waking up started then, but it would have gone much slower.
Yeah.
It did until I was on my own. And you're right, we have this gift to be able to push this fast forward turbo button on our personal development, which has definitely been the case for me.
Right.
Also, that's challenging. So we got to be up for the task to be able to lean into that, because it is our job as an entrepreneur to do that.
Yeah, so true. So let's talk about success. What did it mean to you before, your transformation and before you started to pay much more attention to it? And how did that change?
Yeah, I definitely was following just a really standard societal definition of success. So climb the ladder, get the good job, do all of the things bigger, better, stronger.
Right.
And it never had occurred to me, literally didn't occur to me that there was perhaps another definition. And when I think about the shift and I look back, there's so many of us, and there's nothing wrong with that definition. I just realized it wasn't the one for me. And I can see patterns of this going back pretty far in my life. For example, I was a finance major in college. I studied finance, and I like the subject, really, probably more specifically of economics. But when it came down to it, that was not the place for me. But that sounded like a really good, solid job, right? That I could move up in finance and do all the things. And so I look back at that definition of success and see myself following that original definition, even as early as college or high school, and get good grades, join the honors society, what have you. And I'm still that way. I'm never going to let go of achievements because I don't want to, but the definition of success changing now completely changes everything that I do to align to it.
What matters as well, I believe, is that we realize that ours might be different from other people's who we're seeing on social media or, whose marketing we're exposed to, realizing that maybe they haven't yet paid attention to their definitions of success and they're just following mainstream. And so once we pay attention to our own definition of success, we actually kind of get to create a little bit of distance and say, oh, that's great for them that they're doing this, but it's different for me. That's not what I want for this book or this program or whatever. And really setting boundaries and making sure that we're staying in our own lane.
Yeah, it really helps us reduce the comparison because
Right.
that's great, but that's not my flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of being like, we're in the same race and you're winning or I'm winning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the beauty of it, is that we're all in our own lane, running our own race.
Yeah. So how is that related to knowing your core values? I feel like it's very tightly related.
Oh, it really is. I mean, I think about, as I've come to really understand about myself, every time I've ever felt icky about something in my heart or my gut, my body, I can always trace it back to where I'm out of alignment with my values, always. And when I was working towards someone else's definition of success, the joy was so fleeting because I was usually out of alignment with my values somewhere along the way. And now, like my definition of success now, which is very different from the original one, it would be success would be creating something that alters the course of the world for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, when I hear that, feels like at peace with all of the things, my values, my body can just feel at peace with that. And I think that that's a really good indicator for me. When I feel icky, I know it's attached to my values, and I have to reverse engineer a little bit and say, what am I missing? What am I not aligned with? And how do I make sure that I'm on the path and that I'm following that definition of success? Because if I'm not, I can usually feel some indicator, in my body if I pay attention to it.
Yeah. And I think I can't remember the number, but it's a huge number of decisions, daily decisions we have to make. And every time we basically have to remember our values and say, this or this, which one is aligned with my values, right? The minute you go wrong, you send an email with, the wrong headline or a sleazy approach, then it just doesn't feel good because you didn't actually pay attention to your core values. And I think it's a lot of work to always pay attention to it, actually, because we are taking so many decisions. But I think it really helps to do that work. And actually, so many people talk about values, but often values are kind of misunderstood, and people just say, oh yeah, I value family, or it's usually the family that comes up first. Yes, family is one of them, but what else do you really value? And so for you, it's really just creating something that makes an impact, a lasting impact. And so you will weigh every decision with that in mind. Do I really need this speaking engagement? Is this the right kind of crowd? And, all these decisions. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I laugh at the values, for family. Of course we value family, but I look at values more as like, how do I, at the core of me, want and need to show up as a human? And so, authenticity is huge for me. Commitment is really big, which is why I feel such a probably crushing sense of responsibility sometimes, is that I feel responsible for things that I have committed to, and things like connection. So when I'm not living into integrity and connection and commitment and authenticity, like things go haywire, things go wrong, and it's hard. I agree that it's hard to do this all of the time, and also really simplifies things, because we don't have to be like, what's the right decision? Like, if I can just get quiet with myself and say, like, am I aligned with my definition of success? Am I honoring my values? Am I listening to my essential self, not my my external socialized what should I be doing self?
Mm-hmm.
If I can, that's it. All I have to do is get really quiet, listen to what's going on, what I truly believe. And I can use that in the absence of any other direction or advice. That always works.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. It's complex and yet so simple. If we only knew how to pay attention to it. Yes. What's the danger? Like if we're not following our own definition of success, what's the danger? And maybe you've kind of experienced that in your own life. If we're type A, or if we're like just highly ambitious, what could go wrong?
I think and certainly, at least in my experience, we work inordinately hard towards someone else's goals.
Mm-hmm.
And then we arrive and we succeed and we get there and we say, well, this is it. Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, wow, I did all of this and for what?
Mm-hmm.
And because we know somewhere deep down inside, it's not the right thing for us. And we can spend a lot of time and energy walking someone else's path. And that's okay. A lot of us do it, for different reasons. But I think the danger is truly around, like, we are not realizing our potential and the potential for joy and enjoyment and fulfillment of all of the work that we're doing because it's someone else's goal.
Right. Yeah, it feels like we're chasing after something. The minute we get there, we're like, okay, what's the next thing I can chase after? And it will never end, because what society's definition of success is continuous growth. Like there's always something better that you can, drive for. And so if it's money or if it's physical things, well, there's always more, there's always bigger, right? And so it can get very unhealthy, I would think.
Yeah. And I think that a big part of me dismantling and changing my definition of success truly and how I live it was doing less and dropping things and saying no and what I call the slash and burn on my calendar to-do list, because I had all these things that I was doing that were aligned to the other definition of success. And I still have to do this, right? They sneak in because it sounded like a good idea at the time. And then in 3 months, I look at it, I'm like, what am I doing? That is what someone else told me to do, not what I know to be true.
Right.
And then I delete, I cross it off, I cancel things. I'm like, stop. And so it's a constant exercise to remind myself, like, that does not align. I'm going to course correct.
Right. So that's kind of how we give ourselves permission to say, no, it's okay to say no to certain things, right? And sometimes that also means saying no to the things we actually want to do, but then just realizing we can't do everything at the same time, and just finding this focus of saying yes to the big things, which means that we might have to say no to the smaller things as well.
I don't remember who generated it, but I saw an activity that was like, list 20 priorities that you have right now.
Oh my God.
And then circle, 5 and actively avoid the other 15.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, actively avoid, right? Because they're all good things that you could do. And I just loved that idea. And sometimes I use that idea as a way to edit, even though it's something I like or might be even in service of my definition of success, but it's not the right thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to say no and make good choices.
Yeah, it's about the timing as well, right? You have to say no for right now, but let me put it on, another list maybe for next year. I think it's so important. And I love to always refer to the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown, who describes this so beautifully on, coming back to what is essential and finding out first what's essential to you, because what's essential to someone else, to your mother, to, your boss, is not the same thing as what's essential for you. So
I love that book.
Yeah.
Great. I love his work.
Yes. How does this then all relate to marketing? Because as you know, on this show, we kind of talk about disrupting the current marketing paradigm. In your opinion, how does that impact our marketing?
Yeah. Well, I think that when I think about my business, and marketing in particular comes to mind, is that I've never received as so much advice and competing and differing advice from people as I have in my business. The only other time I've received that much conflicting information was when I had a baby. And everyone had an opinion on how to raise your child.
Right.
And so it's very similar in that way. And I think marketing is a big part of that. When I think of like how I I can't tell you how much money I've spent or time that I've spent doing things that were not properly aligned to my definition of success and what I know to be true about my brand, my business. And because we're all looking for that silver bullet, that's something that is going to help us grow. And so I think for me, when I see this relating to marketing, I've made this mistake enough times that I try and make a really active and thoughtful decision when I'm thinking about what am I spending time doing? How am I putting myself out there? If I look at my website as a really good example, it's super personal to me. And everything that I put on there, I wrote, it's really curated. And that feels really true to me versus I can smell like a content calendar a mile away. And not that those are bad. I use them, but I can just see the gaps in authenticity sometimes.
Right.
And so I try and use my values and my definition of success to decide, do I spend time or money on this? And that continues to evolve over time for me.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you mentioned that you had made many mistakes and had invested money in these cookie cutter approaches because yeah, me too. I spent 12 years, kind of doing what the gurus out there said, that's how it's done. This is how you host a webinar. Here's the webinar script and here's the emails that go with it. And yes, I always try to kind of personalize it and make it mine. But yet, from the outside, it was just a cookie cutter approach. And I did it sometimes not really feeling good doing it. So I think that's why it's so important that we do this inner work and really realizing, okay, enough. I'm a big girl now. I can give myself permission to do it my way, to do certain things, continue them, but with my own approach, with my own priorities, and then also stop doing other things where we feel like, yeah, we have to have a content calendar because everybody says you have to, or you have to have a Facebook page. No, you don't. Actually, you don't. You don't even, I'm all about LinkedIn. You don't have to have a LinkedIn profile, That's not where you feel you're comfortable. Then no, find what works for you. I think that's so important, is that we really, again, go start with ourselves and then figure out, well, what works for me so that it really feels authentic. Because whenever it does not work for you, it's not aligned with your values, then it will never feel authentic.
It's so true. And every time I do it, it doesn't work.
No.
And more importantly, this is the litmus test for me, is that I don't feel good about it. Like the whole point of doing this is to enjoy it.
Right.
And I don't feel good when I am doing, like, anytime someone uses the word funnel to me, like referring to a sales funnel, I'm like, you're done. Yeah. I know that's important and I work to create relationships, but like I can tell you and I are not going to be aligned on how we're going to view this if you use the word funnel. And just, I think that when I know that not everyone necessarily likes to be marketed to in the way that I do. And sometimes I go, oh, well, maybe I could be more assertive here because I'm not naturally very much that way. And I don't like to be marketed to in an assertive way. And then I think about maybe that would work. And I was like, nope, don't do it. That's not who you are. And it means that sometimes things are a longer cycle for me, and that seeds that I plant a long time ago come to fruition later, but they do come to fruition. Right. And I've really learned that staying true to that is the only way that it works for me, and in a way that I feel like I'm having a good time as a business owner.
Yeah, so true. And I'm so glad you're bringing up the kind of the big picture thinking, because we're so in the society again, and we're so surrounded by urgency and needs to be fast and, lots of leads and all of that, that we sometimes get into this mode as well. Again, it's some kind of trance. Oh, let me just, send out another email so that, I get some new leads right now. Instead, step back and say, what's my mission? What are my values? And what's the long-term big picture? And then doing things right and building relationships instead of leads. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think that taking the long road, taking a bigger picture of everything that's happening is a great way to see how these things fit together and doesn't feel so reactionary.
Right. Yeah. This has been great. Thank you so much for this conversation, Katie. I have one more question. And another thing that comes up in your book is this idea of not feeling enough, right? How is the definition of success and not feeling enough related?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure many of us can understand what that feels like. And if you don't, there was a long time that I didn't really understand that probably much of my day I'm feeding myself unconscious messages about not feeling enough. I think that's really normal human responses. But anytime I don't feel enough, what I know now is that I am in danger of following other people's definition of success. Like in the absence of knowing my true self and my true values and needs, I borrow someone else's. And it's like borrowing someone else's sweater, and all of a sudden the sleeves are too long and the material's itchy. Like it's not the right thing. And so I recognize that when I'm going off track, then I can kind of think backwards and say, where is that coming from? And it can usually lead back to some message. I don't even realize that I'm telling myself that I have to do more. It's not enough. I'm not enough. I need to, add more slides. I need to make my handout more exciting. And those are moments when I'm like, okay, what is my goal here? It is not to have a good handout. It is to change people's lives. And so where can I best use my time? Where can I give myself the permission to stop, that it is enough? And so I think that those are very closely tied together, and allowing myself to feel and understand what's happening in my body as a reaction helps me find the trail back to where I'm telling myself that I'm not enough. So it's a really helpful way for me to dismantle some of those thoughts, bring them into the light, and give myself the permission to be enough as it is.
Right. What helps me is reminding myself that I don't have to prove anything to anybody. This word proving for me is kind of like comes with a lot of baggage. And I think I don't know exactly who I was trying to prove something this last decade, but it's definitely something that I'm glad I can say that I no longer feel like I need to prove anything to anybody. And it feels like that's what you're doing as well. It's just saying, okay, enough. I'm enough, and what I'm doing is enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And just bringing it into the light is the first step of being able to do that.
Yeah. Sometimes showing up is enough, right? In marketing, I always say showing up is enough. Yeah. Thank you so much, Katie. This was wonderful. Could you share people where they can find you and talk about your book?
Sure. Yeah, my book is on Amazon, so you can find it there. It's called Hidden Brilliance, a High-Achieving Introvert's Guide to Self-Discovery, Leadership, and Playing Big. And you can also find out more about the book and some of my other, kind of my full body of work, or even find the TEDx talk at katierasoul.com. You can see kind of all the different avenues of work that I have at that website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure to reconnect with you. And and chat about this definition of success. That's so important to me, and I use your exercises, the questions that you have in your book. I prompt people in the Gentle Marketing Revolution to think about these questions because I think it's so important. So thanks so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for that, and thanks for having me on again. It was great, as always, to chat with you.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode and inspires you to think about your definition of success. Please find the show notes at sarahsenecroce.com/GBR19. Again, all the links are clickable in the description of your favorite podcast application. Quick reminder that I would love to get to meet you during the 5-day Gentle Marketing Intensive with 3 live workshops, a Facebook group, and a daily email. I really think you'll get a lot out of it, and you'll meet your kind of people, our kind of people. To find out more, go to bit.ly.com/Gentle Marketing Intensive, and it's totally free to join. I hope you'll join me on this journey to a kinder marketing paradigm, and please invite your friends to join us by sharing this podcast or the Gentle Business Manifesto with them. Both can be found at thegentlebusinessrevolution.com, and yes, a review on iTunes would totally make my day. They just bring a smile to my face whenever I read your review. So thank you so much. Let's be the change we want to see in the world. I can't wait to talk to you again next week. Take care.